Seamus MacShamus, welcome to the chat show.
Good to be here.
Should I call you Seamus, MacShamus, or Mac?
Just Shamus.
Seamus. Okay, great. And tell everyone the area of the world you're in.
I live in Idaho in the United States.
United States, Idaho, which is a beautiful place, as we were just talking about just a minute ago. That's super. Excited to have you on. Thanks so much. And I'll admit to the umpiring crowd that I had the time wrong, and Seamus was very kind to make a change in his schedule. So not only is he a great umpire, he's also very kind with his time. So thanks for making the shift.
I appreciate that. I also appreciate being called a great umpire with only a few games under my belt.
Well, hey, here we are. How did you find the International Kriegsspiel Society?
So the IKS, I'd heard about it a few times several years ago because my friend circle is very active in wargaming and those such things. But I didn't pay. All I'd heard about it was secondhand about the what was it, Grand Normandy or something, where the entirety of D-Day was being done on like company scale.
Yeah.
So I heard about that, but I didn't join based on that. What I actually, several years after I'd heard about this, completely unrelated, I started watching Little Wars TV.
Yeah.
And then they had, I forget which video it was, but they specifically mentioned the International Kriegsspiel Society. And I was like, well, you know what? This sounds interesting. I'll join in and see if there's anything worth seeing over here. And I've been here nearly a year now, and I'd say I have been very blessed to join this community.
I'm glad to hear it. To talk about your other wargaming activities. So you said you had a friend group who does other wargaming. What's some of the other things you'd played before you came on board?
So before I came on board, it was mostly, I guess I got into it by way of Axis and Allies, and just playing that with my family a few times.
Yeah.
Online, it's been a huge like smorgasbord of different things. The Total War series, Civilization, which maybe sort of counts, maybe doesn't. Hearts of Iron.
Hearts of Iron. Yeah. Okay. A lot of computer stuff. I think Civilization counts. You have to think things through and balance resources. And I was a big Civ player myself, so that's we'll give it credit just to the fact that you and I played it. How about that?
Mm-hmm.
What was your first game when you came in?
The very first game I joined when I came in, I believe it was the Halloween live game. No, excuse me. It was the play-by-post, the Malta game. While that was ongoing, I joined the Erfurt campaign that Wolfden was running.
Yep.
And then on about turn 2 of that, I joined my first live game, which was the Halloween game for 2024, or one of them, which was like vampires in Victorian London.
Okay. Well, that's a really great entrance. So you played the newcomer game, you got involved in the play-by-post game, then a live game. So you had a really good selection there up front. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we talk about the newcomer game coming in brand new. The newcomer game was invented by James recently in terms of IKS history, and so it's had a couple of iterations. What was that like coming in and kind of being on a staff with a bunch of new players?
My knowledge of Napoleonics wasn't, and I think compared to everybody else, still isn't terribly good. So it was so in terms of like tactics, I was flying by the seat of my pants.
Okay.
But it's very much more of a staff game compared to most of the other Kriegspiels I've been in, where like it's one or maybe two players to a command.
Right.
But our officer assigned us to multiple different, like he gave us units and then like had us write orders for those specific units. So I was, I believe, in charge of the cavalry.
I've gone back and forth on staff games myself. What do you make of it in terms of staff versus lone command?
I think they fulfill a different experience.
Uh-huh.
So with lone command, those are best if you want to limit communication between players and introduce a stronger element of fog of war inside a single team. Whereas the staff games, I think, are better for more like technical, nitty gritty stuff.
Right.
So, for example, if I were doing like an air and naval war game set, like contemporary setting, I would try and make that a staff game so that because there's a fairly limited knowledge base on that, uh, like just generally, because there haven't
Right.
been very many. I don't think there's been a single occasion of a warship like firing at an aircraft since like the 90s.
Yeah.
Or at least not on like a large scale
Not
of organized nation versus nation. There's been a few times missiles
hard.
been fired at
I guess
ships.
the hard thing now is there's so much that's automated. You'd have the staff would, I guess, would oversee different approval systems. So if you had a missile that was going to hit a plane, you'd have
Yep.
to give approval for release and all kinds of stuff. But yeah, so the staff tends to lend more to more complex situations.
Hmm.
Did you learn from the other players in the newcomer game in the staff mode?
Absolutely, I learned like proper dispatch formatting because when we did split up
Right.
a few times, the staff element went away, and you were just in command of like the three blocks underneath you.
Right.
So like including the time, who it's from, where it's going to. Um, and it's more just the main thing it did was demystify the whole thing and make me more confident that I could uh, just play in more of these.
That's a great point, and that is a really good outcome, right? Because ultimately, these can be a little overwhelming if you come in for the first time.
Hmm.
That's great. So it sounded like you had some experience with strategy games, Axis and Allied Civ, and the rest. You came right in, got involved with some Napoleonics. What is your period or periods of interest now?
I would say it's broadly about 1870 to 1920.
Okay, talk about that a little bit. What areas of the world? What catches your interest there?
Um, I would have so like a year ago, I would have said like organized like great power European warfare. But
Uh
more
huh.
recently, I've gotten more interested in colonial conflicts during that time also.
Okay.
Uh, right this second, I'm actually like preparing a fictional colonial war based on the Anglo-Zulu War for my
Okay.
next Kriegsspiel, which I'm hoping to start next month.
Let's dive into that a little bit because that's certainly has a different set of challenges to it. So, talk about the asymmetry and how you deal with that from a rules perspective, for example.
So from a rules perspective, I've had to fabricate my own more or less from scratch because
Okay.
in the big rule set document in the IKS that you can access, there are none that I could find for colonial warfare at the scale I wanted.
Right.
So I've just been doing a lot of research on the period for because ultimately you can't rely on any sort of like mirrored capability for either side because you have
Right.
one side exclusive well e- exclusively composed of foot mobile warriors with good like esprit de corps and morale, but
Hmm.
who there are actually quite a few firearms available to the Zulu. I think there were 20,000 like firearms in Zulu land at the start of the war, but there's very little ammunition and no training whatsoever. So the standard of
Huh.
marksmanship was poor. And on the other side, you have a mostly professional Imperial Army, supplemented by like volunteer local cavalry
Right.
and a few bits and pieces of artillery that they managed to drag in, and laden down with the most ponderous, unwieldy baggage train that you can possibly imagine.
Right.
Because unlike in Europe, where you've got tons of horses and mules and donkeys, they were mostly relying on oxen, which only move 2 miles an hour on perfect roads. And then you combine that with imperfect roads and rain and sometimes just having to go off road, and it's even slower.
Right. What? So before we get to more about your rules, 'cause I want to hear more about how you built those. Which what do you use as sources for your research? How did you go about that?
Sources I've been consulting various books. One I found in the local library.
Ah.
It was Custer and the Sioux, Durnford and the Zulu, or maybe it was Chelmsford and the Zulu. I don't recall which particular British commander it was, but it was drawing comparisons between the Battle of Little Bighorn and the Battle of Sanawana.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yesterday, I read through a PDF I found, which had been stored on the IKS, called um, Pro. Let's see, Zulu War, 1879, Twilight of a Warrior Nation, and
Well,
there
look
was
at that.
also a South Africa military history article, profile of an army, the colonial imperial forces of the Zulu War of 1879, which gave me a lot of information about like the particular makeup of the volunteer cavalry assisting the British.
Right.
And
Well, the fact
alongside
you
that,
know
I've
that,
been
and the fact
watching
that
the
and that you know about. Mhm.
I've also been watching the documentaries Real Time History put out for the Zulu War, and I have 2 days
Right.
ago I bought 4 books off Amazon, which are coming to me.
I love that. I love it. So you're going deep on it, and the fact that you're getting into this detail of the orders of battle aren't just British and Zulu. You've got locals. You've got all sorts of detail there that you're able to tease out of these sources.
Mhm.
That's great. And so, how are you? You said a fictional account, so you're going to create a battle that is true to the period, but it's not one of the ones we hear about, right?
Yes, because one of the main features of the war, which I don't think you can recreate if you just like take the scenario and hand it to the players, is the uncertainty the colonial forces have about the actual like interior of Zululand. Because if you look at the military maps they have at the start of the war, they're terrible. Like
Right.
they have the coast and the rivers in the right place, and then like between them they have a little scribble in the margin that says like thorny hills and stuff like that,
right.
without any like.
Right.
There's no topography drawn there except the
Right.
most obvious features. So I didn't want to just reuse the map of like South Africa and Zululand, even though that would have been much easier, because then the players would be able to. There'd be no chance of them getting lost. So what I've
Right.
done is I've taken a swatch of land from somewhere else on Earth, and I've actually commissioned Wolfton for the map, and I'm having him create 2 maps: a perfect topographical map of the area that the natives and the umpire are going to use, and that all like combat and screenshots are going to take place on, and a second lower quality colonial map that the colonial forces will have to plan with.
That's
Which
great.
is the
That's
second time I've done this
yeah.
because I did the same thing in the first Kriegsspiel I ran, Battle of Custoza, or excuse me, the Custoza Retreat.
Right. I think that's so interesting because it forces the players to really just come up with a concept of an operation if they have the poorer maps, and then they have to use their own initiative when they find that actually the terrain is more detailed or different.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that I will see like the actual use of cavalry scouts and so forth instead of keeping them close to the army for a decisive charge.
How do you inform the players of that disparity between the maps they get in there? Because just part of the way we play, oftentimes people are used to the map in TTS or whatever the platform you use is the one you get in planning. Do you point that out to them specifically?
Oh yeah, I tell them the maps you've been given in the Custoza retreat battle. The map the Austrians had, they were pursuing. They had a like crude scribble on like a napkin that a hussar had made, which was
Right.
more accurate towards the side where they were starting, and it became less and less accurate the farther away from the starting location they were. And I made sure very clearly to tell them, and in the like actual style of drawing the map, it was clearly a like rough thing.
Right.
And for the
Right.
colonial map, it'll look a lot nicer, but it's still going to have all of the like the ambiguities written down on it. Like, oh, there were some hills with like thorns on them here, and over here is open plains. And also,
That was
I
very
should tell
much a
the
feature
players
of the
directly.
period, right? Yeah, very much a feature of the period that the maps were not widespread. We think in modern terms in terms of cartography and satellites and all the rest. But back then, a map was a precious thing because they had to be really hand drawn a lot of the times.
Certainly. I toyed with only giving the uh, colonial commander a map and then having everybody else just have to memorize it, but I think that might be a bit too much with how it's a shorter period of time in game than it is out of game because it's 3 days per
Yeah,
turn.
right.
Uh, So I'll let them keep their copies of the colonial map.
Cool. Okay, so this is a play by post you're putting together? Did you?
Oh, certainly. With the rule set I've got, it'd be impossible to run live, at least without several experienced assistants.
We'll talk about that. Why? What is it about your? Talk through the rules because we put that on hold. Let's go back to it. So talk about the rule set.
So an important feature of the time is that the colonial troops were just not able to forage very well, and even if they'd had the inclination to try and forage in the area, there's just not much there, especially in
Right.
terms of you can't forage Martini Henry cartridges out of Zululand.
Of
So
course.
they
Right.
need to be stuck to their supply line. So that means I need to have fairly sophisticated rules for the supply line. And there were several major,
Okay.
well, moderately important engagements during the war where the Zulu raided supplies. They captured 700,000 Martini Henry cartridges out of a group of wagons at one point, or
Is
maybe it
that
was
right?
70,000. I don't
A
recall where
lot
the
though.
zero goes, but it was a lot.
Yeah.
Um,
So part of
so it's
the
just a
part of the
matter.
experience of the colonial powers, they had to truck all this stuff over vast distances.
Yeah, and before the Battle of Asanalwana, the central column of the British had spent like a week just creating a road between the Asanalwana camp and Rorke's Drift, and they just
Right.
sat there during that time, improving that, or well, creating it basically.
Yeah. Right.
So they're
What, and what did you use as the inspiration for the supply system? Did you pull from another rule set, or did you go from cut it from whole cloth?
I have not taken it from another rule set, but I am
Okay.
hoping to be looking around more operational rule sets to see what they've done.
Yeah. Okay. I think one of the challenges with supply is it can feel gamey if you're not careful. So it kind of breaks the beauty of Kriegsspiel because you can see a simple mechanic like you're out of this kind of supply for a day. When you're talking about, as you've talked about with the specifics of your period, the oxen and the slow movements, and that's a very unique supply problem. So I think that's what if you solve that, that'd be great.
Yeah, it's
Hmm.
it's also they have a limited number of wagons, and they have to compare the
Right,
different needs they have for them. So, for example, an infantry battalion, and I say battalion here because some of the regiments had more than one battalion, and by some I mean
right,
exactly one. Uh,
okay.
they need about 17 wagons just to carry all of their equipage. So, spare ammunition, tents, cooking supplies, also the rations. But I need to figure out specifically how many of those carts were dedicated to carrying food because that's important to know. Um,
You think about a wagon? Is 17 of them? That's a long column. I mean, that's you know what I mean. That's a lot of kit.
that was actually so there were five different columns that went into Zululand. Only the one had as few as 17 wagons. The most had about
As few as
300.
17. Right. That's a huge formation in and of itself, right?
Yep, and that's just the ones that were like with the column. That's not counting the independent ones, like going back and forth with new food, new ammunition.
Yeah, right, right. Always logistics. So you've created the supply approach. You'll get some information from other sources. How about combat? Did you use another set of rules as inspiration?
Uh, n- uh, so I started by looking at James's D8 rules, but I
Right.
had to step away from those pretty quickly because I don't think it represents. It's it doesn't really consider very strongly like one side has guns and the other only has a chance for melee. Well, I discussed earlier about all the firearms the Zulu have, but
Yeah.
it expects peer forces basically.
Right. Right.
Um, so I've just gone back to the drawing boards with on the tactical level, company pieces, and looking at. So in terms of, I think the rules actually more closely resemble a bolt action, with like a suppression being stacked over time as you get shot at, in addition to any losses you might have, or in exclusion of them if you were shot at to no effect.
Right.
And it's just what where the rules are at right now is just all the bad stuff that can happen to you gives you suppression, and then depending on how much suppression you have, you lose a morale state, and then your morale state controls what a unit is willing to do. So
Well, now, Seamus, you started off by saying, "Well, I play a little Axis and Allies," and now you're unpacking bolt action. So I think you got a little more depth to your knowledge base here than it at first appeared. That's great. You play a lot of bolt action.
I've only played it
Or you-
twice.
Okay, but but if you're talking about using the suppression out of bolt action and only played it twice, that's good on you. That's well thought through. Good.
I
That's
think I
great.
have a fairly wide, but I don't want to say shallow, but like
Yeah.
short experience with
Diverse.
many different systems.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, so the before I joined the IKS, I had been involved in a sort of, I guess you'd call it a matrix game, which was the U.S. versus China in the South China Sea,
Right.
with the Chinese trying to invade Luzon to support their invasion of Taiwan, and we had to stop them.
Yep.
Um, Trying to think of more examples that I didn't mention earlier, and they're escaping me right now. Oh,
Well,
I
that's fine.
played
Yeah.
what was it? Less than 60 miles. It's a large scale, like hex based Cold War system.
And I didn't want to take us down the too many different systems road, but you're pulling from some inspirations that are great. Talk about this idea of suppression and how you use it in Kriegsspiel. It sounds interesting.
So I think the basic problem I wanted to solve was, um, you know, when should people, when troops are getting shot at, uh, they like to take cover first, and then it takes. If they're in cover, they don't want to leave it, even to run away, unless
Right.
like something particularly bad happens, like the enemy is getting closer with bayonets.
Yeah.
So I wanted to have a morale system mostly based on like the danger troops were in or perceived they were in.
Yeah.
So and also with more neatly, I think. Oh, I say more neatly, just integrating the like cohesion or reliability of troops into that. So what I've got right
Uh-huh.
now is troops have a cohesion rating, which is basically like how good they are. Uh, when they reach a number of suppression tokens which are equal to a multiple of that cohesion rating, they lose one morale state.
Okay.
Um, so, for example, if you have a unit with 3 cohesion and it's got 6 suppression tokens, it has fallen 2 morale states from what it started at. Whereas
Okay.
if they had a cohesion of 6, they would only have fallen by 1.
Right. And now you use tokens as a
Uh,
way to track these different states, or do you use how do you track the states? Is a better way to ask that.
I don't know yet, but I imagine I'm going to be using tokens.
Okay.
I'm hoping to have a way where it's invisible to the players, but I can easily like reveal it to the umpires. But that's I'm doing all this in TTS, so that's going to require either a way to make the pieces invisible or invisible on one side and flip them over.
Right. One idea is you right click on the piece and then put it down in the description. You write all that in there, and when
Mhm.
the umpire scrolls over it, they can get the information that way. It's faster and it's easier than flipping. That's just a little. That's what I discovered the hard way.
Mhm.
So anyway, you'll figure that out. That's interesting. So you've got the morale suppression. So but suppression happens each turn, right?
Suppression happens each turn they're being shot at, or each turn
Right.
they gain suppression, for example, from being in close proximity to the enemy. Because there's the historical tendency of when they get at about 70 yards of the enemy to stop and shoot it out instead of proceeding with the charge like they were ordered.
Right.
So if they have been shot at a bit and they're cohesion is appropriate for it, that would be the point where they stop and like they lose their ability to charge and they just start shooting it out. Uh, which I hope works out in practice because I still have not run a playtest with this yet. This is all
Okay.
like what I've got written down.
Sure. Well, that's you put your finger on something really important. And in fact, a lot of formations of the period were to keep people moving, not so much about firing.
Hmm.
So you would get an assault column of the 1870s on, or even up to and including World War One, would be about just keeping people moving rather than jumping the cover, as you've correctly identified. Okay, cool. So
Yeah, and
you're
to
so how
circle
far
back
along?
to
So you haven't
the
done a
asymmetry,
yeah, please go ahead.
uh,
Yeah, please.
to circle back to the asymmetry, I've been thinking about giving the colonial and the native forces different morale states that disallow different things as they fall to them, because it doesn't make sense for the Zulu to stop at 70 yards and
Right,
at a fairly low amount of suppression as compared to what a more Western force would stop at, because they don't have the
right.
reliance on firearms so much, because their entire way of war is getting close to the enemy and eating them up, which is what they call
Yeah,
uh, like attacking them with spears.
right. They would get out of danger by rushing in, where the people who use firearms would get out of danger by jumping in a hole. Right? It's different
Yeah,
ways
exactly.
of
That's it.
yeah.
The fastest way out of
Interesting.
danger is through the enemy.
Right, right.
Uh,
And so that
to
it's
a
an
point.
instinctive reaction, right?
Yeah,
How do you get good information on how the Zulus fought? Is it from those books you talked about?
yeah. Just canvassing lots of different sources. It was
Uh-huh.
extremely difficult to find order of battle information on the Zulu until I started like looking at the really obscure stuff.
Right.
Um, especially like the names of different MP or how many warriors were in a particular one or which age group it was, because most people only speak about it in like generalities.
Right. You know the famous they call it the horns of the
Oh yeah, the
buffalo.
horns of the buffalo. Everybody knows about that at least.
Right. That's a pretty garden variety stuff. But like knowing the down to the well, for example, where they came from, I imagine there's some sort of geographic. The MPs were pulled from a certain number of villages. I'm guessing, right? But they're still human beings that needed that cohesion based on their cultural piece. So interesting.
Hmm.
And what did you? What was your best source for that? Do you have one that really nails it? Sometimes you find one that's gold, usually because the author shares your interest, right?
So far, the Twilight of a Warrior Nation that I spoke about earlier
Yeah.
has been the best, but it was actually written by Osprey Publishing, I believe, so they had it specifically in mind for wargaming, which has been very
Okay.
convenient.
Very. How will you divide the commands for? I mean, the colonial side probably will feel more like some of our other games, but how would you do the commands for the Zulu?
For the Zulu, I'm going to make it one level up because when you're in charge of 1,000 guys, mostly equipped with spears and certainly intending to get very close to the enemy and just you don't have many decisions to make. So for the native forces, I'm going to put them in charge of groups of the full MP instead of an oh Lord, what was the? I think there's a level of command between the MP and the Abutho. The Abutho is the like 100-ish man like company unit.
Okay. The cohort of the Zulus, right? Cohort level.
Yeah.
Well, I think cohort was
Well, in
more
any
than that.
case, it's just the the natives are going to be in charge of more guys per player than the
Yeah, which
colonial
makes
troops will
sense.
be.
Okay. And what was an MP?
MP is so I believe in the Zulu language, it's just a generic term for military unit, but in
Okay.
like English parlance, it's used to as a synonym for regiment.
Okay.
So
And so
that'd be
one of the horns of the buffalo would be how many MP? Would be one MP each, or would there be multiple doing that
it'd be
cauldron? Yeah.
it'd be multiple usually. I believe at Isanawana, the left and right warrants were both 3 or 4 MP, but the MP aren't
Huh.
of like uniform size to one another. They are
Right.
uh,
Right.
like based on age. So some of them could be 1500, some could be 3000, and that's
Right.
at their full paper strength as far as the Zulu are concerned. Although they don't really, to say paper strength is inaccurate with them because they don't like have establishments of these. This is just all the troops of that age from that area.
That's interesting. Yeah. There's that geographic and age. So it was age based. And MP was age based.
Yes. So the result
Right.
was you would have the younger, more fit, more impetuous regiments would be put in the wings, and then the older, more steady and solid troops would be put in the center.
Really, that's interesting.
Because
Yeah.
the young guys can run farther, and they're more. They have the naivety of youth, so they have a lesser fear of the bullets.
Yeah. More risk tolerant. Got it. Well, you've done a tremendous amount of work here. That's great. What is your playtest plans, or how do you think you're going to approach it?
So the play testing, I think, is mostly going to be the tactical level stuff. I think the operational stuff should be reasonably easy to sort out.
Okay.
Uh, the tactical stuff, I think I'm just going to end up play testing that with the assistant umpires I've picked out. Because
Okay.
I learned, I didn't mention it, the second game I did, Vacuum Wars, was a hard sci-fi space game, which is totally, utterly divorced from what I'm talking about. I've been talking about the last however long this has been.
Right.
But that one, I took on too much work as an individual, and the result was I had to cancel the game after a
Okay.
few turns.
So talk about what you learned from that. Let's go into that a little bit. Vacuum wars.
So what happened was when the Bunny Hop video dropped on the IKS, or about
Yeah.
Kriegsspiel dropped, we had a massive
Yep.
influx of players to the IKS. So I
Right.
said, "Oh, I need to like run an emergency game right away to, fill all these players."
Yep.
At the time, I had been planning a game based on the Battle of Britain, which was a operational or strategic level like air war game. But because that was and still is in a very early stage of development, I discarded it in favor of something I thought I could run faster, which in this
Right.
case was using the bones of a war game system I had made myself about 2 years prior, uh, like to form a Kriegsspiel rule set. And the reason I was doing this instead of running a Black Powder game or something else with a existing and better tested rule set was because I felt those were pretty well served at the time with the various red versus blue games cropping up frequently. And
Right.
so I wanted to show the new players a different like side of the IKS.
Uh huh.
But the result was I had to take a rule set which I'd playtested once and which I had not adjusted the rules from since the playtest. I still had the lessons learned. I just needed to write all that down and then make serious changes to it after inviting like large numbers of players to come in. And then
Right.
because I wanted to fit as many of the new players as possible, I just left it at essentially unlimited recruitment. And I quickly
Yeah.
ended up with about 30 commands filled up, and that's with every single one of those having a 2IC. Um,
That's a full and sufficient game there. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. 60 players in with a rule set knocker. What? So if you look back on that, what would you, if you were to change one or two things to have made that doable? What would you have done?
First of all, take on assistant umpires. I knew I needed
Okay.
assistant umpires at the time, and I even put a slot on the Google Doc that people signed up on to volunteer to be assistant umpires. But
Yeah.
I became afraid of like the act of uh, like reconciling our views on what should happen and like scheduling and so forth. So in
Okay.
the end, I did not actually take any assistant umpires, which was clearly and cleanly a mistake. I should have done that. Um,
So
and
in terms of the reconciling, was it just something you hadn't had a chance to plan out, or was it something in there mechanically that is no fun for you?
I'd never done it before in a play-by-post game, so I didn't actually quite
Okay.
understand how it would work out.
How to do it? Yeah. Okay.
Since immediately after Vacuum Wars was canceled, I joined another play-by-post game as an assistant umpire specifically to get those skills, so it didn't happen again.
And
Uh,
what did you see there when you joined that?
so that was the first of Victoria's Warhammer games, and what I
Okay.
saw there was just the assistant umpires writing reports and taking screenshots for the various commands, while the main umpire did all the resolution of combat and movement and so forth.
Okay. And then how many commands did you handle in that
Two.
game as an assistant umpire? Two. That's a nice. That's yeah. It's a great way to go. Right.
The other
Two
thing I would
reports.
change
Two screenshots. Yeah. Go
is
ahead.
I would have used a rule set I actually understood and would have been able to like prepare the planning materials for uh, before the planning time ended,
There you go.
because I was still like writing the like nitty gritty of the like missile defense rules while players were discussing like on turn 3 many missiles to launch at their opponent, which
Right.
was a very bad situation for me to be in, and for me to put them in because they had to ask questions about like very reasonable questions about what they expected the capability of enemy defensive weapons to be.
Right. It's an incredibly alarming experience as an umpire when they ask a question and you think, I hadn't thought of that.
Mm-hmm.
And we all have that experience. So, so trust me, it's not just you. Yeah, yeah, okay. And science fiction's a tough one to bite off, regardless, because there's so much of the world that isn't assumed. So if
Yeah,
you go back to 1870, there's a lot of the world that's assumed. You don't need to tell people what a Martini and Henry rifle is. That's generally known. For people who don't know it, there's lots of material. But when you talk about how a weapon system works in the vacuum wars, you've got to build it all from the ground up. So it's hard.
yeah, I've got to build it all from the ground up. I had the third thing I did wrong, I think, was I asked not too much of the players, but I put a lot on the players all at the same time. So in addition
Yeah.
to like orbital mechanics one-on-one for several of them, because there were a few people who hadn't even played a Kerbal Space Program to get a floor of orbital knowledge. Uh, in addition to that, for several players, I had them do 1 week of procurement planning and then the second week of like serious planning. So my idea
Okay.
was I gave them a number of starting ships, and then I gave them a budget to design and purchase new ships. And then
Okay.
after that, they would get some intel on the ships the enemy had purchased in the same time, and they would then do their actual like planning and deployment and so forth, which I
Yep.
think is still a good idea, like on paper, but the execution would have been a lot better if I had tested the system much more and had assistance and so forth.
Yeah. But that's an idea that has merit. That's a keeper. Talk through the things that from doing that, uh, in those initial stages that you thought were good ideas you're going to try out in other games. So that's one that could be it, right?
Yeah, uh, the the sensor system. So normally you give players a screenshot of all the stuff they can see and a report of what they can hear, but in this case, I had to also give them what their sensors could see. So, like, when they got close enough, they got a number of radar contacts, and also in a given orbit, they could detect how much heat was being radiated. And then when they got
Right.
close enough for the radar contacts, they could then divide that out and make a guess at like, oh, these ships are all probably like heavily focused on lasers because it's a small number of them and they're all emitting a huge amount of heat. Or these ships are probably all missile ships because there's a ton of them and there's very little heat. I think that
That's
was
a
interesting.
sophisticated thing you're talking about there. An interesting approach, and it's sophisticated because that means the players have to be trained on the different emission levels and things like that, and then you have to be accurate in your portraying them. Yeah.
Yes, that there was some like difficulty getting the math correct on my end for how much heat was actually being emanated from a given orbit. But I
Yeah. Yeah.
eventually solved that by just writing how much heat was being emitted from a given fleet on their token in a TTS, like in the description.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's one thing for sure, and I think the audience will agree. You have a lot of interesting ideas that merit further exploration.
I certainly
Paced
hope
well, of
so.
course, in proper properly, so you don't get yourself overwhelmed. So okay, so you had that experience, a couple good ideas there, a couple lessons learned, and how are you applying that lesson learned back to the Zulu campaign that you're thinking of? What are what's the size of the player commands you think in order for it to stay manageable?
So the number of units a player has, I think they can deal with fairly large number, especially if they have a 2IC. So with the let's take a British regiment for example. They've got 8 companies of infantry, um,
Yeah.
their own headquarters, their the wagons specifically carrying their own equipage, and then any cavalry they
Uh
might
huh.
have attached to them. Which let's say it's like 3 troops. I
Right.
think considering most of the time their orders for their infantry are going to be like 4 companies form a line like here, and then the other 4 companies form a perpendicular line to them. I
Yep.
think that's going to be a fairly simple like number of units for them to keep track of. And I do intend. Someone else a while ago mentioned an issue of like the screenshots being like blinks in time, and we don't see the movement in between. So I'm going to include
Right.
arrows behind the units at the in their screenshots showing where they moved from to get to where they are now, which hopefully will alleviate that issue somewhat, especially for faster moving units.
And how will you make those arrows? Like, what's the mechanics of that
I'm planning to just in the screen, snip software, just draw them there.
in the Snip software? Okay, because you're a PC based and you use the Snip software.
Yes, it's.
Okay.
I used to just snip out a square and then bring that into Krita to do it there, and then someone told me that you can just like snip out, whatever shape you want if you just select the freeform option, and that was a
Yeah.
revelation for me. It saved me so much work.
There you go. Yeah, umpiring is 90% saving yourself work. So with uh, with experience, you create the same output with less and less work, which is the joy of it. That's
Hmm.
great. Okay. Cool. And then so how many players total? So you got would it be 4 or 8 on? They would command 4 or 8 companies, and then the Zulus would have more people per player. But how many players total? How many reports would you have to write per turn? I guess is the better way to ask the
Um,
question.
so I'm debating if I want to actually amalgamate the number of player commands on the colonial side into like based on their column. So give them like 5 column commanders and a CIC, or if I want to give every individual like regiment its own commander, which would about double the number of players I have to deal with, or the number of commands and screenshots and so forth.
Yeah, well, that's a
And
big deal, right? Figuring that out.
mhm. If I do
Mm.
that, then yeah, I'll only have 4 or 5 players, or excuse me, 5 or 6 reports to give, depending on how everyone is located
Per side.
on their side. Yeah,
I mean, per side. So you have 5 per side. Okay, that's doable. All right, cool. And what's your timeline? You think a play test soon, or when do you think? 'Cause I'd love to have a look at what you get up to.
I could probably do a playtest like in 1 or 2 weeks. But the full game, I'm still waiting on the map
Okay.
from Wolfton, and I need to finalize the operational system before I get started on that. And then I need to, write the briefings and so
Where are you
forth
going
with
to get
both
your
sides.
pieces? So
Uh,
Wolfton's going to do good work on the maps. Where are you going to do get your pieces?
the operational pieces currently, I have borrowed a few of the like infantry and artillery pieces and cavalry pieces from, oh Lord, what's it called? Otovsky's Napoleonic system, because they're
Yep.
nice and thin and long.
Yeah.
And then on the tactical level, I've actually borrowed, I think it's Colin's chess pieces, where he's taken a bunch of pawns on Tabletop Simulator and like glued them together to form like company blocks of 100 pawns each, and then they're
I've seen
colored
those.
based on
Yeah,
the
that's
size.
great.
And
Is that what he actually? I've seen him. I didn't know. I didn't actually pick up that it was the pawns from TTS. That's great. Yeah. Okay. So that's good. I love the creativity of that.
mhm, I think they look really nice, and it lets me reduce the abstraction on the tactical scale, and also hide information like unit numbers and names and so forth from the enemy.
Right.
And it
Right.
also means if I make the screenshots blurry at the edges, they're going to have a harder time determining at a distance who's friend and who's foe if there's any ambiguity at all.
Talk about that. How will you blur the screenshots? I've seen a couple techniques used, but what's your approach?
I think I'm going to take Wolfton's method of like creating a like layer with a preset like blur filter at different ranges, and then
Yeah.
importing my images into Krita, which is the free Photoshop alternative, and just editing them there to get the appropriate blur. Um, and
So
combining that with
let's talk. Yeah,
line of
let's
sight.
talk real super detailed mechanics. So you take a snip of the screen, you then draw your arrows on it, you dropped it into Krita, and it's got a pre-positioned layer that blurs the edge. And then you move the
Yes.
screenshot inside Krita so that gets you okay.
It would also,
How do you make
because
sure that
the
the size
colonial
of the
troops
snip
have,
works? Hmm.
because the colonial
Go
troops
ahead.
have like field glasses and so forth, um, they would have a farther distance before the blur sets in. So that's
Right.
another piece of
Okay.
asymmetry I think would be interesting.
So how do you think about taking the snip for a colonial troop versus a Zulu commander such that by the time you get it to Krita, it's fast and you're not messing around with it a lot? Where do you do the adjustment? Is it up front or do you do it in Krita?
So I would do my best to get the actual like snip the correct shape I want in the actual snip tool before I
In
bring
the
it into
actual snip
Krita,
tool. Okay.
rather than have to like snip it once, get in there, like I don't want them to be able to see over this
Right.
particular like ridge,
Right.
so I'm going to snip that out now with the
So Krita really just adds that layer in quickly, then you off it goes.
yeah, exactly.
Gotcha. And do you snip Krita basically? You make a snip of the Krita screen, or do you export something?
I think I will be exporting it just to preserve the quality, so it isn't like
Okay.
going twice through only being like a third of my screen.
Okay. Play by post, you have that luxury, but I can see now why these little things are the things that keep it from being a live product.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Well, that will be interesting. We should definitely plan a follow up, even a small one, to say how you learn, because ultimately the saving yourself time by putting the arrows or putting any sort of modifications in the snip tool versus exporting it to Krita for the arrow. Those types of things you'll find in this process, and so you'll discard some things, you add some things to make it faster, basically,
Hmm.
with hundreds of iterations. That's good. Though you're keeping it to 10 reports, which is excellent. Because if you had 30 reports, it'd be a long night doing exporting things to Krita, right?
Yes.
It's great.
And it's
I like it.
not to mention you'd have to then write 30 reports, which is actually it's hard to do that and stay sane at the end of the process, I think.
How do you approach writing your reports? Are you what's your philosophy on that? Long, detailed, short into sweet, more images? What's your approach on your reports?
The purpose of the report, in my view, is to show everything the screenshot cannot. Uh,
Okay.
so if you hear like cannon fire off in the distance, that's absolutely something to go in the report. Um, Sometimes there's like a church steeple or something reaching up over the horizon that they can't like you can't include on the screenshot they've been given, but
Right.
you want them to be aware of.
Right.
Um, there's before now that I'm doing the arrows, I hopefully don't need to do this, but telling people where units came from and what they're doing right now. beyond the like.
I think the arrows are an interesting idea. I'm anxious to see how that turns out. I think it does bring life to it when you can see where that unit came from. Kind of even if did it go straight? Did it go up over the hill? These little details really matter. I think that's an interesting idea.
Yes,
It was cool. So, are you a historian by nature? Or how do you are you a big reader? Do you consume? You said earlier you use some YouTube, and you have. It sounds like you like lots of books. So how do you like to research?
I'm definitely a big reader. I got into trouble in Spanish class in high school for reading like history books underneath the table instead of doing Spanish.
Yeah, yeah. There you go. There you go.
I
Good for
used
you. Well, you're traveling in good company because I bet you 90% of the IKS membership hid the history books in some sort of cover of another subject.
Yeah.
So
Before I had my current job, I worked for 5 years at a Barnes and Noble, which gave me a nice like 40 and
okay,
then 50% discount. And
yeah,
being a book lover and then working in a bookstore is not unlike being an addict working in the crack den.
yeah, yeah. Right. I could never work in a bookstore. I never leave. That's my problem. Yeah. So that's and what is your source of books now? You said you ordered some. Are you an Amazon guy, or do you go to the library? What's your you went to the library for one of your books? Obviously, you said it earlier. What's your source?
I go to the public library when I can and when they have stuff, but it's not a terribly like large library by the standards of like public libraries. So for
Right.
most everything else, I've got to either go to Barnes and Noble like in town or uh, purchase the books off Amazon. And when possible, I use Google Books or what do you
Yeah.
call it? Project Gutenberg.
Yep. Yep. I think the IKS membership well acquainted with all those offbeat um, services because a lot of the types of things we like to read are have been digitized from some library somewhere and actually aren't available on Amazon. So that's cool. What if you look at the whole umpiring process? What gives you the most enjoyment? What's the juice for you? Is it the research? Is it the play itself? Is it the rules? What do you like?
Watching players plan and seeing all of the things which are probably going to go wrong ahead of time. Uh,
Yeah, that's the fun part, right?
yeah, because it's like it feels mischievous, I guess, which is not something I can usually like feel in uh, like a social setting without being a bad
Yeah,
person. But in this case, it's like it's part of
right,
it's being deliberately introduced, and the players know it because they've been informed that they don't have all the information.
right, right. It is amazing to watch people go through a process of deduction or induction, and you're watching it knowing that their assumptions are wrong. You just see them going, you say, "Oh boy,
Hmm.
here they go."
Or when you can see
um,
their opponent's plan,
you
it's
feel
like,
for them.
oh, I see,
Yeah,
you're doing everything the enemy wants you to do, or oh
yeah,
no,
right, right.
they're doing everything you
Oh
don't want them to
no,
do.
I got it. That's great. Well, you'll make a great umpire over time because if you enjoy that planning part, you'll make sure that planning process is fully informed. And so once the players have a good planning process, it usually makes for a better game. So that's great.
Hmm.
What's your approach to getting players? Do you get them from the recruitment channel? It sounds like that was one of your approaches, or do you have your own group that you kind of cultivate? Do you think?
So far, I've exclusively gone to the recruitment channel, and it's worked out perfectly fine
Right.
so far. I don't
Good.
do first come first serve because uh, there are some people who want to play Kriegsspiel games, but they can't because they like recruitment posts go up when they're at work or something, so they can't
Right.
join as soon as it goes up. So instead, what I do is I put up a Google like form. They put in all the information, then I randomly select players from that after a few days.
How do you think? I know you're earlier in your umpire career, but how do you think you would handle more players being interested in what you're producing than you can actually host in a game. What would you think? What would you do with the? So let's say that you had your 10 slots for the well designed Zulu scenario or multiple scenarios, and you had 50 people interested who just pinged you and said, that looks really cool. I'd like to be a part of that. What would you do with the other 40?
So I would open up a number of 2IC slots for a start. I might be
Two
able
I
to
see.
do one like wild card slot of like a war correspondent or something, because I'm sure there's at least one player who'd be interested in doing that and walking around and interviewing people and writing newspaper articles, and they would be low maintenance from like a command perspective.
Right.
But other than that, I guess I would have to see about running the scenario again, but with all the hidden information about the capability of the other side. As long as they're not a
Yeah.
spectator, that should probably still work out.
Right.
So I would not be totally averse to just running the same game multiple times.
Okay. And if well designed, it doesn't matter that even the general context is known. A different plan from the enemy means a different game, right?
Exactly.
Because the capacity of the Zulu and the British at the time were known, and the British and their allies. So, what you had that terrific learning experience with the vacuum wars. What other advice would you give to an umpire early on in their journey, that based on what you've seen and learned?
That's a very good question. You might think you can take on the world. You
Mm-hmm.
probably can't without sacrificing everything else.
Yeah.
So, like, keep a realistic assessment of your own capability and call in help when needed.
Sage advice. Sage advice. Born of good lessons learned, right? Good lessons learned.
Yes.
What other thing would you love to tell the umpire community of the International Kriegsspiel Society? Because that's our audience. This is a podcast by umpires for umpires. So, what else do you think you'd like to share?
Um, I guess I've got my schedule for like different game ideas I've got planned to run the rest of the year.
Okay, give us a high list. Give us a list of those real quick.
So August through September, I'm planning to run the Zulu game that might last through early October. Um,
Okay,
in late October, I'm going to run in a private server, not as an open Saturday, a live Halloween game, which I'm
all right,
deliberately not giving details on because I want it to be a surprise
of
to the
course,
players.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
then in November, December, I'm hoping to run a playtest of my another wargame system I've been working on for a while that I've adapted to the Kriegsspiel, like a grand tactical or operational World War One rule set. In this case, I'd be focusing
Ooh,
on testing the
ambitious.
air and artillery systems.
Yeah.
So it'd just be a so-called quiet portion of the front where like the ground troops don't move at all, and then the players are only in command of artillery and aircraft, and just
Uh huh.
run that for like 3 days or a week in game, and see how everything works.
Okay. Hydroxide lithium is another umpire who's done a lot of work on the Eastern Front World War One stuff. So he might be someone that would give you some notes on it. So it's I'm interested myself in World War One. I haven't taken a crack at it, but that should be interesting. I look forward to seeing what you come up with there.
Mhm. Yeah, my hope.
Terrific. I've really loved hearing about your Zulu adventures, and it was great. I mean, you're a good. I think you're an organized and methodical thinker. You're unafraid to say, "Hey, this didn't work." All the recipes for continued improvement in skill at being an umpire. So it's been great to listen to your thinking on this.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been great. All right, Seamus, that we'll wrap it up there. We'll see you out there on the board, and I look forward to seeing your Zulu adventures.
I look forward to seeing it as well.
Okay, hang in there real quick.